Poor girl shares umbrella with old man in rain. Next day, a millionaire knocks on her door. Before we dive into this story, where in the world are you watching from? Smash the subscribe button and turn on notification for more tales like this. In a city where dreams go to die, where concrete towers cast shadows over broken hearts and empty pockets, the rain falls like tears from heaven, washing away hope as fast as people can find it. In this cold, unforgiving place, most folks walk past suffering without a second glance. But not everyone. Emily, just 16 years old, carrying the weight of the world on her thin shoulders. Every morning, she wakes up in a cramped apartment where the walls tell stories of struggle. Paint peels like old scabs, water stains mark the ceiling like battle scars, and the furniture looks like it's given up on life. Her mother works herself to the bone, cleaning office buildings when the rest of the world sleeps. Emily herself serves coffee and cleans tables at a local diner, watching tired workers come and go, each lost in their own battles. School is her escape, the one place where she can dream of something bigger than these cracked sidewalks and endless grey buildings. But even dreams cost money they don't have. On this particular day, the sky opened up like it had something to prove. Rain poured down in sheets, turning streets into rivers and sidewalks into streams. The storm was angry, violent, and unforgiving, just like the city itself. Emily stepped out of the diner, her old umbrella barely holding together, its fabric torn but still fighting. The wind tried to rip it from her hands as she started her walk home, thinking about the warm soup she'd make for her mother. That's when she saw him. An old man, soaked to the bone, sitting against a wall like the world had forgotten he existed. The rain beat down on him without mercy, and he just sat there, taking it all. No fight left in him. No hope in his eyes. Most people would have walked past. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would have made excuses about why it wasn't their problem. But Emily wasn't most people. Emily's feet stopped moving. Her heart started racing. This wasn't just any stranger, this was George, the old man she'd seen around the neighborhood. He always sat with a cup, asking for help from people who pretended not to see him. But today, he wasn't asking for anything. He was just giving up. The rain hammered down harder. Water ran off his grey hair like a waterfall. His thin coat stuck to his body like a second skin. He looked so small, so broken, so forgotten. Emily felt something twist in her chest. She couldn't just walk away. She wouldn't. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she moved toward him. The storm roared around them, but something inside her was louder than the thunder. "Sir," she called out, her voice fighting against the wind. "Are you okay?" George looked up. His eyes were cloudy, tired, but still warm somehow. Still human. "Just waiting for this storm to pass, young lady," he said, his voice rough like sandpaper. "It's been a hard day." Emily didn't think twice. She held out her umbrella, her only protection against the storm. "Want to share? I can walk you to the shelter down the street." George stared at her like she'd just offered him the moon. People didn't do this. People didn't stop. People didn't care. "You sure about that? You'll get soaked." Emily was already helping him stand. "I'm Emily." "And yeah, I'm sure." "Name's George," he said, his old bones creaking as he got to his feet. They huddled together under that tiny umbrella. Emily felt the rain immediately soak through her shoulder and down her back. The cold bit into her skin, but she didn't move away. She didn't complain. She just kept walking. Their steps were slow, careful. George moved like every step hurt, but he kept going. The rain drummed on their shared shelter, creating a rhythm that somehow felt peaceful despite the chaos around them. "I used to build things," George said suddenly, his voice cutting through the storm. "Houses, mostly. Had my own business for 20 years. Emily listened without saying a word. No judgment. No questions. Just space for his story. Built homes for families. Watched kids grow up in houses I made with these hands." He held up his wrinkled fingers, still strong despite everything. "Had my own family too. Wife, 2 kids. We weren't rich, but we were happy." They walked past a bus stop where people huddled together, all of them looking at their phones, ignoring the world around them. "What happened?" Emily asked gently. George's shoulders sagged. "Economy crashed. Lost the business first. Then the house. Then." His voice cracked. "Then they were gone too. Couldn't handle the shame, I guess. Can't blame them." Emily felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. This man had built homes for others, and now he had no home of his own. He'd created shelter, and now he sat in storms with nowhere to go. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That must have been so hard." "Life's funny that way," George said. "One day you're on top of the world, next day you're sitting in the rain wondering how it all went wrong." They were almost at the shelter now. Emily could see the warm light spilling out onto the wet sidewalk. Soon, George would be safe and dry. "You know what's strange?" George continued. "I used to walk past people like me. Always had somewhere important to be, you know? Always had an excuse." Emily nodded. She understood. "But you stopped," he said, looking at her with something like wonder. "In all this rain, with all your own problems, you stopped." Emily felt her cheeks warm despite the cold. Everyone deserves help when they need it. They reached the shelter door. George turned to face her, and for a moment, the storm seemed to quiet down. "Thank you, Emily. You've got something special, don't let this world take it away from you." Emily smiled, water dripping from her hair. "Take care, George. Maybe I'll see you around." But neither of them saw the black limousine parked across the street. Neither noticed the tinted windows or the man inside watching every moment of their encounter. Neither realized that this simple act of kindness was about to change everything. "Would you stop for a stranger?" Debate in the comments. Inside that black limousine, a man sat frozen in his leather seat. John Williams had seen it all. 53 years of life, 30 years of building his empire, millions of dollars in the bank, and he'd never witnessed anything like what just happened on that rain-soaked street. His driver kept the engine running, windshield wipers fighting against the storm. The tinted windows gave them perfect cover. Nobody could see in, but John could see everything. This wasn't supposed to happen. John had been heading to another boring business meeting when the storm hit. Traffic crawled to a stop, and he'd been stuck here for 20 minutes, watching people run for cover like scattered ants. That's when he saw her. A teenage girl in worn clothes, walking slowly through the downpour. Most people were running, cursing the weather, focused only on their own comfort. But she stopped. She actually stopped. John leaned forward, pressing his face closer to the window. The old beggar, he'd seen him around the city before. One of hundreds of forgotten souls that most people stepped over or ignored. John himself had probably walked past him a dozen times without a second thought. But this girl didn't walk past. She offered her umbrella. Her only umbrella. In the middle of a storm that was soaking everyone to the bone. What's she doing? John whispered to himself. He watched as she helped the old man stand. Watched as they huddled together under that tiny, torn umbrella. Watched as she let the rain soak through her own clothes while keeping him dry. John's chest felt tight. When was the last time he'd seen pure kindness? Not the fake charity smiles at his fundraising events. Not the calculated generosity of tax write-offs. But real, honest, selfless kindness. In this city of 8 million people, where everyone was too busy, too important, too focused on their own problems to care about anyone else, this teenage girl stopped for a stranger. John had spent his whole adult life in boardrooms and penthouses, surrounded by people who only helped others when there was something in it for them. He'd become one of those people himself. But this girl? She expected nothing. She wanted nothing. She just saw someone who needed help, and she helped. The girl and the old man moved slowly down the street, sharing that pathetic umbrella like it was the most precious thing in the world. John's throat felt thick watching them. "Sir," his driver asked. "Should we continue to the meeting?" John shook his head. The meeting didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except following this girl who had just restored his faith in humanity with one simple act. "Follow that girl," John said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "Stay back, but don't lose her." The limousine crept forward, keeping its distance as Emily said goodbye to George at the shelter. John watched her turn and continue her journey home, alone now, completely soaked from the rain. She walked with her head up despite everything. Despite the storm, despite her wet clothes, despite living in a neighborhood where hope seemed to die on every corner. She had something that John's money couldn't buy. Something that all his success couldn't give him. She had a heart that still worked. Emily climbed the steps of a rundown building, disappearing through a door that looked like it barely hung on its hinges. John memorized the address, his mind already working, already planning. He'd built his fortune by recognizing opportunity. But this wasn't about business. This was about something much more important. This was about finding the kind of person the world needed more of. The kind of person who gave when they had nothing to give. The kind of person who stopped when everyone else kept walking. Emily had no idea that her simple act of kindness had been witnessed. She had no idea that a millionaire sat in a car outside her building, planning to change her life forever. She just went inside, probably thinking about making soup for her mother, completely unaware that everything was about to change. Share this with someone who needs faith in humanity, you might change their day too. Morning light crept through the cracked window of Emily's apartment, painting weak shadows across the peeling walls. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean but still broken. Emily moved through her usual routine, the same dance she'd performed every morning for years. Toast 2 pieces of stale bread. Check if there's enough coffee for her mother. Count the coins in the jar by the door. Her mother had already left for work, another early shift cleaning offices before the business people arrived. The apartment felt hollow without her, filled only with the sounds of neighbors arguing through thin walls and traffic humming 3 floors below. Emily pulled on her school uniform, a white shirt with a small stain near the collar that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. She was reaching for her backpack when it happened. Knock. 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 Sharp. Demanding. Different from the usual sounds of their building. Emily froze. Nobody knocked on their door. Ever. The mailman left everything downstairs. Neighbors minded their own business. Bill collectors usually just slipped notices under the door. The knocking came again, more patient this time but somehow more serious. Emily's heart started beating faster. She moved to the door on silent feet, pressing her ear against the wood. She could hear someone shifting their weight outside, the soft sound of expensive shoes on concrete. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Good morning. I'm looking for Emily. I believe that's you." The voice was smooth, confident. Not threatening, but not familiar either. Emily had never heard it before in her life. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a suit that probably cost more than her family's rent for 6 months. He looked clean, polished, like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Silver hair perfectly styled. Hands that had never scrubbed floors or served coffee to rude customers. Everything about him screamed money and power. Emily's mouth went dry. Rich people didn't come to her neighborhood. They didn't climb 3 flights of stairs in buildings where the elevator hadn't worked in 2 years. They definitely didn't knock on doors at 7 in the morning. "I don't know you," Emily said through the door, her hand gripping the chain lock. "No, you don't. But I know you. I saw what you did yesterday. In the rain." Emily's blood turned to ice. Someone had been watching her? Following her? Her mind raced through every scary story she'd ever heard about girls who disappeared, about strangers who seemed nice until they weren't. "I need to go to school," she said, backing away from the door. "Please. Just give me 5 minutes. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." Help. The word hung in the air like a question mark. Emily had learned not to trust help from strangers. Help usually came with strings attached. Help usually meant someone wanted something back. Help from rich strangers in expensive suits. That was the most dangerous kind of all. But something in his voice made her pause. He didn't sound like the men who catcalled her on the street. He didn't sound like the landlord who always looked at her the wrong way. He sounded genuine. "What do you want?" Emily asked, still keeping the door between them. "I want to talk to you about yesterday. About what you did for that old man." Emily's chest tightened. How could he know about George? How could he know about the umbrella? Unless... Were you watching me? I was stuck in traffic. I saw everything. Emily's hand shook as she touched the door handle. Every instinct told her to keep the door locked, to pretend nobody was home, to wait until he went away. But curiosity was stronger than fear. Slowly, carefully, Emily undid the chain and opened the door just wide enough to see him clearly. He was older than she'd thought, maybe in his 50s, with kind eyes and a face that looked like it smiled often. He didn't try to push the door open wider. He didn't step closer. He just stood there, patient as stone, letting her decide what came next. "My name is John Williams," he said simply. "And I think you might be the most remarkable person I've ever met." Emily stared at him, her mind spinning. John Williams. The name sounded familiar, like something she'd heard on the news or seen in newspapers. "I don't understand," she whispered. John's smile was warm, but his eyes held something bigger. Something that made Emily's heart race for entirely different reasons. His next words? Not a threat, but a thunderbolt. "Yesterday, in the rain," John began, his voice steady but filled with something Emily couldn't name. "I watched you give your umbrella to an old man. I watched you walk with him, get soaked to the bone, just to make sure he stayed dry." Emily's grip tightened on the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You were in a car. A black limousine. Stuck in traffic during the storm." John's eyes never left her face. "I've lived in this city for 30 years. I've seen people step over bodies to catch a bus. I've watched folks pretend not to see suffering right in front of them. Emily felt heat creep up her neck. It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have. No. John's voice cut through her words like a knife through butter. Anyone wouldn't have. That's the point. In a city of millions, you're the only person I saw stop. Emily shifted from foot to foot, unsure whether to slam the door or keep listening. Nothing about this made sense. Rich men didn't show up at poor girls' doors to talk about umbrellas. "What do you want from me?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. John took a small step back, giving her more space. "I want to give you something. Something you deserve." "I don't deserve anything. I just helped someone." "Exactly." John's smile was sad and proud at the same time. You helped someone when you had nothing to spare. You shared the only protection you had. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Emily's head spun. This felt like a dream, but the cold morning air on her arms was real enough. "I own properties all over this city," John continued. "Safe apartments in good neighborhoods. Places with working heat, windows that close properly, doors that lock tight. I want to give you and your mother one of those apartments. No rent. No catch. Just a safe place to call home." The words hit Emily like physical blows. She stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the wall to steady herself. That's impossible. You can't just give away apartments. I can do whatever I want with my own buildings. John's voice was gentle but firm. "And I want to do this." Emily's mind reeled. A safe apartment. No more leaky ceilings or broken windows. No more listening to her mother cry at night when she thought Emily was asleep, worrying about next month's rent. "But that's not all," John said, watching her carefully. "You're in school, right? Smart girl like you probably has dreams about college." Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "I want to pay for your education. All of it. High school, college, whatever comes after. Books, supplies, everything. You focus on learning, I'll handle the bills." The hallway started spinning. Emily gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. "Why?" The word came out like a croak. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." John's expression softened. "Because kindness like yours is rare. Because people who help others when they can barely help themselves are treasures. Because this world needs more people like you, not fewer." Emily felt tears burn behind her eyes. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I need to think," Emily said, her voice shaking. This is too much." "Of course. Take all the time you." The sound of footsteps on the stairs cut him off. Emily's mother appeared around the corner, still in her cleaning uniform, moving slowly like she always did after a long shift. Maria stopped dead when she saw John. Her tired eyes took in his expensive suit, his polished shoes, his confident posture. Her face hardened into the mask she wore when dealing with landlords and bill collectors. "Emily, get inside. Now." Maria's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Mom, wait." "He's not. I said inside." Maria stepped between Emily and John, her small body radiating protective fury. "And you, whatever you're selling, we're not buying." John raised his hands, palms out. "I'm not selling anything, Mrs. It's none of your business what my name is." Maria's eyes blazed. "Rich men don't visit poor girls for good reasons. Whatever game you're playing, we're not interested." Mom, please. Just listen to him. Listen to what? Another smooth talker with empty promises. Maria turned to Emily, her voice cracking. Baby, I know you want to believe people are good, but men like this don't help people like us. They use people like us. John stepped forward slightly. She saved someone yesterday. In the rain. I saw it happen. Maria's expression flickered, confusion replacing anger for just a moment. Your daughter shared her umbrella with a homeless man during the storm, John continued. She walked him to safety, got soaked to the bone doing it. She didn't know anyone was watching. She just did it because it was right. Maria's eyes moved from John to Emily and back again. So I want to reward that kindness. I want to give you both a better life. A safe apartment. Money for Emily's education. A chance at something better. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. Maria's hands shook as she processed his words. You're serious, she whispered. Completely serious. Maria's tough facade cracked like ice in spring. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, years of struggle and worry pouring out in silent streams. We've been fighting so hard, she said, her voice breaking. So many years of barely making it. And you want to just help us? John nodded. Sometimes the universe puts the right person in the right place at the right time. Your daughter is that person. Comment kindness wins if this hits you in the heart. Let's trend positivity. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in the middle of her new living room, still unable to believe it was real. Sunlight poured through clean windows that actually closed all the way. The walls were painted fresh white, no water stains or peeling patches in sight. The furniture was simple but solid, a couch that didn't sag, a table that didn't wobble, a bed for each of them in separate rooms. Her mother had cried for 2 straight days after they moved in. Happy tears, shocked tears, grateful tears. She kept touching the walls like she expected them to disappear. But Emily hadn't forgotten where she came from. And she definitely hadn't forgotten George. Every Tuesday and Friday after school, she made the trip back to her old neighborhood. Not to visit the crumbling apartment building, that part of her life was over. She went to see George at the shelter, carrying a brown bag with sandwiches, fruit, sometimes a thermos of hot soup. The first time she showed up, George's weathered face lit up like Christmas morning. Emily! Look at you, girl! You're glowing. She was. The stress lines around her eyes had softened. Her clothes were clean and new. Her smile came easier now. I brought you lunch, she said, settling down beside him on the shelter steps. George unwrapped the sandwich with careful hands. You don't need to do this, you know. I heard about your good fortune. You've got your own life to worry about now. Emily shook her head. This isn't about need. This is about want. I want to be here. And she meant it. The fancy new apartment was wonderful, but these visits with George felt like home in a different way. They reminded her of who she was before the money, before the opportunities. They kept her grounded. Tell me about the carpenter days, Emily would say, and George would light up, sharing stories about the houses he'd built, the families he'd helped shelter. His voice would grow strong again, remembering when his hands created instead of just asking for help. Word spread through the shelter about Emily's visits. Other residents started looking forward to Tuesdays and Fridays too. She didn't bring food for everyone, she couldn't afford that yet. But she brought something just as valuable, attention. Respect. The simple act of seeing them as human beings. John watched all of this from a distance. He'd check in with Emily and her mother regularly, making sure they had everything they needed. But he was most proud when his driver reported back about Emily's visits to the shelter. "She hasn't changed," the driver told him. "Still the same girl who stopped in the rain." John smiled. He'd made a lot of investments in his life, buildings, stocks, companies. But this was different. This wasn't about making money. This was about making a difference. "I don't invest in real estate," John told his business partner one afternoon. "I invest in hearts. And that girl's heart is worth more than any property I've ever owned." His partner looked confused. "What's the return on investment?" John gestured toward the window, toward the city beyond. "Look around you." One act of kindness created this ripple. Emily helped George. I helped Emily. Now Emily's helping others. The return isn't money, it's hope. The shelter director started noticing changes too. Residents were sitting up straighter on Emily's visit days. They were talking to each other more, sharing stories like George did. Some were even asking about job programs, about getting back on their feet. One teenage girl's simple choice to share an umbrella had started something bigger than anyone imagined. In a world obsessed with taking, sometimes giving is the ultimate power move. 2 years passed like pages turning in a book Emily never thought she'd get to read. College acceptance letters piled up on her new kitchen table. Full scholarships from 3 different universities. Academic awards she'd only dreamed about. Doors opening everywhere she looked. But every Tuesday and Friday, Emily still made the same trip. Back to the old neighborhood. Back to the shelter. Back to George. The routine never changed. Brown bag in hand, she'd find him waiting by the window, his face lighting up the moment she walked through the door. "There's my girl," George would say, and Emily's heart would swell every single time. Today was different though. Emily had bigger news than usual. "I got in," she said, pulling out the thick envelope. "Medical school. Full ride." George's hands trembled as he held the acceptance letter. His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "Dr. Emily," he whispered. "Has a nice ring to it." What George never told her was how much these visits meant to him. How he'd started marking calendar days, counting down until Tuesday. How other residents had begun calling him George with the angel because of the girl who never forgot him. The shelter had changed too. Emily's regular visits had started something beautiful. Other volunteers began showing up. Former residents who'd gotten back on their feet came back to help. The whole place felt different, alive with hope instead of just surviving. The director pulled Emily aside one day. "You know what you've done here, don't you? You've reminded everyone that they matter. That they're seen." Emily shook her head. "I just visit a friend." "That's exactly why it works," the director smiled. John watched it all unfold from the sidelines, his investment paying dividends he'd never expected. Emily's mother had started volunteering at a local school, helping kids with reading. The kindness kept spreading, person to person, heart to heart. Emily's story had become legend in their small corner of the city. The girl who shared her umbrella. The teenager who didn't forget where she came from. The young woman who proved that success doesn't have to change who you are. As Emily walked home from the shelter that evening, she thought about that rainy day 2 years ago. The moment when everything changed because she made one simple choice. She didn't know it then, but George had been praying for exactly what she gave him, not just food or shelter, but dignity. Respect. The gift of being seen as human. In return, he'd given her something just as precious, the reminder that kindness is never wasted, even when nobody's watching. The city bustled around her, same as always. But Emily knew something most people had forgotten. Behind every face was a story. Behind every story was a person who mattered. Behind every person was a chance to make a difference. One umbrella. One rainy day. One choice to stop instead of keep walking. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support tells YouTube to spread stories that matter.